Well, I'm a migrant. That's a start. So inevitably, as a migrant, you take a different sort of interest in the country to which you migrate. And it's a big move. I think people forget how big a move it is. So I came from Ireland, and strange to relate, Ireland and Australia have a lot in common. They have a very old heritage, a very romantic heritage, but they've had their problems. There's quite a lot of similarity between some of the indigenous issues and some of the old Celtic traditions. So I felt very comfortable here, and as soon as I arrived, I was ready to participate in however I could. Well, in my work, I did a lot of work on tax policy, and I found that very interesting because it wasn't so much the tax technical issues, but people were very often on the side of fairness or competitiveness, I found, and very rarely use the "and" word. So I quickly came to the realization that the "and" word was terribly important in Australia, that you shouldn't be on one side or the other, that there's room for both, for and against. So the use of tax policy took me into ACOS and social issues, which in turn obviously gets into the poor on the one hand and the wealthy on the other. And again, it's the "and" word. You've got to make sure that it's not just wealth creation, that wealth distribution is appropriately balanced. And again, I find too many people say, well, wealth creation is the first and only thing. Well, it's not. And we know that because of the poor and the sick in the world, which is a huge proportion, disproportion, we've still got a basic attitude problem worldwide in the developing countries. So Australia is uniquely placed. It's got a good legal system, it's got strong professions, it's in an area where it can contribute, and therefore the Global Foundation embraces that concept that we live in one world, that we're no longer the British Empire or Australia or India or China, we're one world. And that's why we bring together a very diverse group of people in not a mediation role so much as a facilitation role, to see that they can add to each other's knowledge and basically try and make them look externally as well as internally. And of course, when you look at the Republic debate, which will come round again, I think for me, as an Irish person, I belong to the old Republic idea, which was tended to be inward-looking, tended to be defensive, whereas today, whatever we have, however it's described, we will have to be external, we'll have to be optimistic, we'll have to be positive and not negative. So I think there is a new meaning to Republic in terms of regionalism and our place in the world, and I think Global Foundation is a great place to discuss what does that mean practically. You would think that any university or profession could get together a group of people to talk about matters important to Australia externally, politically, economically, demographically, whatever, and that is true. But it's very hard to get such a diverse group together, to get the universities, to get the doctors, to get the scientists, to get the accountants and the lawyers all in the one place where they're challenging each other's assumptions. And that's essentially what the Global Foundation does. Now, how does it use it? Well, I think probably there's a term, the second track diplomacy, which means the non-official way of meeting and greeting and working with other countries, because officialdom sometimes gets it wrong. So the Global Foundation has an enormous ability to stretch into other countries, Indonesia or China, countries that we want to have more to do with and to be friends with, in a very diverse kind of way. So it's rather than send a group of accountants or a group of academics or a group of medicos, we bring those together, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, big time. I think that there's no substitute for experience. I started going to meetings in Australia when I was about 30, and I didn't know very much. And I've been to a lot of venues and meetings and speeches, and it takes you time to pick up, to have the sort of radar to make the connections that are involved. So it's very important that young people, men and women, start to do things early, even if they think, oh, that's too hard, or I don't have the confidence. You just need to take small steps, and gradually you grow, and people do grow. And there are so many success stories that's impossible to know. So Global Foundation has to be very open to everything. It is a citizens' organisation, and that means everyone. We've had a huge history with older people, like Zelman Cowen, Alfred Brooks, Dame Elizabeth Murdoch, were all early contributors and supporters of this direction, way before their time, I might add. I think the recognition that there are not two societies in the world or in Australia, that we shouldn't think of two different societies of the haves and the have-nots. And by that, I don't mean that we should be naive and go one where pretend problems don't exist. They do. But yes, to provide a balanced discussion, to use the and word, that it's not either or, that yes, people that are wealthy can and should help people that are less wealthy. People that are less wealthy have an obligation to do what they can for themselves. And I do believe that is a major issue we can work on, because Australia has got a state of mind in some places that essentially people say to you, my rights are as follows. And when you say, can you tell me about your responsibilities, you get a blank stare. So bringing that sort of balanced argument in a sensible way so that there's an objective response to people that are excessive on either side, I think that is a great discussion to have. And somehow we've got to reflect that in the new form of government that emerges, whether it's in a preamble to our constitution, but we've got to have an attitude check to make sure that when we talk to each other, we have a common language.